Of course, Colbert's Super PAC is all about building bridges, and that is why I was truly gratified recently to see that even after the things I've said about Muslims, I received a contribution from Arab American viewer Suck Madik. I trust I'm pronouncing that correctly. You've made your parents proud. Your father, Lika Madik, and your mother, who still goes by her maiden name, Munch Makuchi.
Things that could not be said today. You can mark that down on one of the funniest live things that have ever been out there. This is a thread that has been on Twitter now, and these videos just keep on surfacing and surfacing. So if you want to laugh your butt off, go to social media, go to Twitter or X, and find the thread that talks about the funniest live video ever, and you will just laugh your butt off. And that's what we're doing on the Minnesota Tim podcast. We're starting it off with a laugh, and then we're transitioning to Minnesota Vikings talkers. So the Minnesota Vikings have finally agreed to terms with offensive lineman Dalton Reisner. Now, Dalton Reisner was the guy who came along last season, signed on with the Minnesota Vikings after he couldn't find a team, after playing with the Denver Broncos for 4 seasons. And it's really a mystery because Dalton Reisner played pretty good for the Minnesota Vikings last year. He stepped in, filled the spot for Ezra Cleveland, filled that role really well, to the point where the Minnesota Vikings felt comfortable trading Ezra Cleveland to the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's how performance-based Dalton Reisner... Huh? Wait, what?
Huh?
That's how well Dalton Reisner played for the Minnesota Vikings last year. And you go into free agency after playing really well for the Minnesota Vikings, and you would think that there would be one hungry offensive line needy team out there in the NFL. Yet nobody came calling for Dalton Reisner's services.
You kidding me?
No, it's unbelievable. Like, of all the teams that struggle with offensive line help, including the Minnesota Vikings, it took this long for a team, the Minnesota Vikings, to re-sign Dalton Reisner. And here's the thing. They didn't sign him to a 3-year deal, a 4-year, 5-year, even a 2-year deal. This is a 1-year contract, which shows absolutely zero faith in a player, whether it's in the NBA, NFL, hockey, doesn't matter. If you sign a player to a 1-year deal, you are telling that player that we do not trust you to be a good player for multiple seasons for our football team. If you're signing a contract, the last thing that you want to sign is a 1-year deal. Because do you know what that means? No, you don't? Okay, that means that if you get injured in that 1-year deal, your career might be over. Done. See you later. Bye-bye. Move on to the next guy. If you sign a 1-year deal, that doesn't just mean like an injury could devastate your career, but that means if you play poorly, that might ruin your career too, because who wants to sign a player that is coming off of a terrible season? So really, this Dalton Reisner, he came onto the scene with the Minnesota Vikings last year, joined the team after 4 games, didn't start right away, eventually starts, and he plays his absolute butt off. He played spectacularly for the Minnesota Vikings last year. And he gave the team a little like oomph. He gave the team a little grinding action. He gave the team some toughness on the offensive line. He doesn't just look tough, but he plays tough too. So I just don't get it. I don't get why NFL teams are hesitant to make a deal to sign Dalton Reisner to a 2-3 year deal. Even the Minnesota Vikings, like, I get that his number might be higher than the Minnesota Vikings wanted to pay him. Okay, fine. Then why didn't a crappy team like the Las Vegas Raiders come calling, or the crappy team like the Carolina Panthers come calling, who struggled with offensive line help last year when Bryce Young just got killed? So this Dalton Reisner, must be something about him that teams don't like, whether it's his size, his pass blocking, or his run blocking. But according to the numbers last year, he played really, really well and stepped into a difficult, tough situation because he wasn't even with the team in training camp and preseason. Even for the first 4 games of the regular season, he wasn't on the Minnesota Vikings roster. So it's really a interesting mystery, because I feel like he's played well to warrant a 2 to 3 year deal, and he's still young, 28 years old, only played in the NFL for 5 seasons now. He's a starting quality offensive lineman, and the Minnesota Vikings, they signed their go-to backup Blake Brandel, and he's very flexible. You can move him around the offensive line. So maybe that was why the Vikings took so long to re-sign Dalton Reisner. But the truth still remains. Why didn't another team come calling for Dalton Reisner's services? I don't know. I'm not quite understanding how Reisner's performance last year doesn't warrant a contract that's more than 1 year from one of the 30 NFL teams. Are there 32 teams? I don't know. How many teams in the NFL are there? How many teams? Is there 32 NFL teams are there? 32 teams from one of the 32 teams in the NFL. Now you're watching this video like, what? This guy's an idiot. He doesn't know that there's 32 teams in the NFL. What a jackwagon. Anyway, that's the podcast today. Dalton Reisner, welcome back to Minnesota. We didn't trust you. We didn't want you. But your number came back down, so I guess we'll take you. That's kind of been his whole career. I mean, even last offseason, nobody wanted him. And when the Minnesota Vikings wanted him, I was very hesitant to bring him on because no other team wanted him. Aren't you desired, or can't you tell just how much you're desired by how many teams or players or general managers want you on their team? Dalton Reisner's playing well, and he only has one team that wants him, the Minnesota Vikings. Booyah. Thank you for watching. If you're watching, please hit that subscribe button right there. And if you're listening, please rate, review, and follow this podcast wherever you are listening to this podcast. Everyone, take care. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.